With templates? Anybody not use templates in Management Studio? Okay, so templates, they basically let you store a piece of code somewhere and you can call it up through the Template Explorer and you can hit Control-Shift-M and it gives you this little like VB6 hokey dialog where you can type in your parameter values to replace. So Snippet does that, but it actually lets you do it in line. So I go here, I say Insert Snippet, and it pops up a list. They have a bunch of built-in ones, but you can create your own. It's a little tedious. I wrote a blog post about it. Actually, I wrote a tip for SQL Tips about it, and that should be published soon. So here I have a set of templates, or a set of snippets that I've created. So what's a piece of code that I write a lot that is kind of tedious to remember all of the syntax for? Cursors. So I declare cursors all the time for maintenance tasks and everything else. People say stay away from cursors. We'll talk about that on Thursday. So I use cursors quite a bit, but I always forget all of the options to make it an optimal cursor, right? So if you just say declare C cursor for and then run a query, you've got dynamic cursor that holds locks and does all of these things that make them really bad. So my cursor code looks like this. So we've got a declare C cursor, local static forward only for, and then my query, and then for read only, and open, fetch, and we've got variables and all of these things. Now you'll see there are some highlighting going on here, right? So this is a token that matches this. It matches the current one that's holding, right? So if I wanted to change the name of my cursor to my cursor, I type it here, hit tab, boom, it populates all of them at once. The big thing about this is templates. If you have a template for this code and you want all of your developers to use it, you need to send them the template. And they need to put it on their machine because it has to be on your C drive with your settings for, like your Visual Studio settings file for Management Studio.
Can you do that in something like SourceSave or something? Like a team foundation service?
Yeah, you could, but it still sounds kind of tedious, right?
Oh, for templates?
This
No,
for templates?
You have to have local.
No, but you could pull those from source control.
Yeah.
But still, if you update one of them, you have to tell everybody to go pull the new one, right? Tedious. Snippets you can store on the network. So your custom snippets folder can be on the network. So you update one, everybody's got the newest one the next time they
So I
call
can
it.
use yours and I can use it.
Yeah, if I say you need to write your cursors this way, you don't have to go and find out what my way is. You just point to the network location and you've got it. So I think that's pretty powerful.
But now, if somebody makes changes to it, are they going to overwrite your snippet?
Well, you can't really. So you can control that through Windows. So if you have a network location, you can make that read only for all your users except for you. So you're the only one who can make changes to it.
Hey, Eric, can you pull up an example where you've got more than one parameter?
Yeah, this one does. So I've got a select query here. Unfortunately, this one is only here once, right? So select foo from bar. Now if I hit tab, here I've got foo, and it's kind of hard to see because it's at the bottom of the screen.
So it tabs as you hit.
Yeah, it goes to the next one. It doesn't tab the text. It actually goes to the next token.
So it does go to the next
So
token.
if this variable was at bar, hit tab, and it jumps around the screen if it's your last token, but it replaced this one as well. Okay, so clipboard cycle. So I'm going to close my cursor, then I'm going to copy, deallocate my cursor. Now instead of hitting Control V, I'm going to hit Control Shift V, and it's going to paste the last one I copied. If I hit it again, it's going to paste the previous one. If I hit it again, it's going to paste the previous one. This is from a different code sample, and it cycles through.
To visually see all the list.
You can't see the list. You have to cycle through. It doesn't have a pop down. But once you get to the one you want, you just let go, and it leaves it there. Restore options. So I have a database here that I've run a bunch of backups and log backups on. So there's an option here called restore, and I can say database or I can say page. The page option asks for a file ID and a page ID and all of this, but it lets you restore a single page, which is pretty powerful if you're trying to restore something that got corrupted or whatever. How do you do that today? Not through a UI. Now if I want to restore at a point in time, I go to the same menu, restore, database. There's an option here called timeline. Everybody see that? I go in here and I say to a specific date and time. So I've got this nice little slider here. Like I said before, it's kind of Mickey Mouse, but I can drag this slider all around and say I want to restore to exactly 6 a.m. I don't care what my backups or log backups
And
look
those
like.
marks are your partners, right?
Yeah, so the dark green are full database backups. I didn't do any diffs, and these are transaction log backups that are covered. So this log chain exists.
You actually type in the time text box.
Yep. So I should be able to say. So if I want to type and be a little more precise than the stupid arrow lets me be, I can type
Okay.
600. Right. So then I click OK. That doesn't actually do it. I think that's a little misleading. I think they need to fix that dialog to know that I'm not actually doing it right then. But if I don't want to run it from the dialog, I can actually script it to a query editor window. And there's that script that I would have had a hell of a time writing on my own.
Yeah. Your syntax is horrible.
Yep, I agree. And I made the same complaints the first time I saw it, but it was already done and checked in, so it was, by the time they show us, it's too late to fix.
I'm sure the various companies that offer refactoring software will be more than happy to
Yes.
administer that.
Yeah.
All right, so that's Management Studio. And what is going on? There we go.
Mark.
So the next one is SQL Server Data Tools. These were actually called SQL Server Developer Tools up until RC1. They changed the name to Data Tools so that they wouldn't focus on developers too much. It's not Steve Ballmer jumping up on a stage anymore. And these were called Juno during the betas that you probably heard about or read about. They did a lot of marketing around this. Basically, it's a Datadude meets Management Studio. How many people have used Datadude? The Visual Studio for Team Professional Edition database people, whatever. They had this long,
I used to use it
400
a long
name.
time ago. About 3 years ago.
Okay.
Really called Data Dude?
Yes.
That was its
Yeah.
nickname.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
That's
a good
pretty common knowledge that it's called Datadude. I think that's pretty
Visual
public.
Studio for database professional.
It's longer than that.
Yeah,
It's like
database-
Team Edition for
Team Foundation
database.
services for database professionals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like
Yeah,
that. It's
that's
a really long, hard to
It
swallow.
has schema compare, it has data compare,
Yeah.
and that whole kind of stuff out in the box. So
Yep. So that's here. This is the continuation of that project. It's a little bit better. I think I'm the only one here who probably remembers WordPerfect 5.1. Anybody?
I
All
used
right.
it.
Remember reveal codes? Remember F11? Pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
So miss that.
Right.
So miss that.
So
I wish I had that word.
you can do that here with a table. So if you're creating a table, like some people use the grid to design their table, right? They type in they pull the data type from the drop down and they tab and they go through. Well, down below, there's actually a create table T-SQL. So when you make a change to the grid, it changes the T-SQL. If you make a change to the T-SQL, it changes the grid. And I think that helps a lot of people who need to rely on the grids learn
You're right.
the create table syntax. You can't check your grid design into source control, but you can check in create table. And I think it's a lot more scalable to actually learn the create table syntax. So I think that helps those people. The tool also provides for sandbox development and debugging. So it actually, instead of in previous editions, you installed an instance of Express, and you had to manage that. You had to provide security. You had to do all these things around it. It was running all the time. This actually fires up when you need to debug or when you need to run. So it's an instance of SQL Server, sort of, but it's just sitting in the background. There's no security or anything else. You're the only one who's allowed to connect to it. It's very much a sandbox. It provides all the functionality of the engine without an instance to manage. You can deploy to 2005, 2008, 2008 R2, SQL Server 2012, Azure, and it knows if you use a feature that's not supported in Azure, for example, that the build breaks. It doesn't let you build if your target is Azure. So if you use something, I don't even know offhand what all of the features. I know there's a big list of features that you can't use in Azure. If you use one of those features in your code and you try to deploy, it'll break. What it doesn't do, unfortunately, it doesn't tell you when you've used something that doesn't work in Standard Edition. So if you're developing on Developer Edition and you use partitioning, for example, it's not going to break when you try to deploy to Standard. It has no idea what a SKU is. There's a smart refactor and delete. So if you want to change the name of a store procedure, it actually finds all the references in all the code and changes that for you. Points out objects that still reference something you're trying to delete. There's an easier way to deploy CLR. So everybody using CLR for stuff. So I use it for regular expressions, a couple other things, and it's a pain in the ass when you need to change your function in CLR. It's a hassle to deploy. So this is supposedly going to make that easier. However, if you're using Datadog today, there are some features in Datadog that haven't made it to this platform yet. So if you think you're just going to shift all your projects to the new version, it's not going to work. I do want to show the little reveal codes thing because I think it is pretty cool. And my system will freeze up again. All right, maybe I won't. We'll come back to that when the VM starts responding.
So is this a separate executable, do you know?
Yeah, it's Visual Studio, but it takes on a different shell. There's even a different splash screen.
Are they planning on integrating this back together so far?
Yeah, but not in this version.
Okay.
So it's not in the management studio.
No,
It's
no. But you can do most of the things that you can do in Management Studio from the data tools.
And you'd also be able to run multiple instances or different instances of the management studio.
Yes. Yeah. So there's new functionality around metadata discovery. So today, if you want to find out, I have this store procedure. What is the output? You turn set FMT only on, and you run the store procedure, and it comes back with a result. The problem with that is if you have conditionals in your store procedure that depend on different parameters, that kind of thing, it doesn't really tell you the whole story. There's some other bugs with FMT only on that I can show that make it not as reliable. What this does is it allows you to call a store procedure and you can pass in, or you can reference a DMV or call a store procedure and pass in either a SQL batch or an object name, and it'll tell you what the first result set looks like. The most powerful part of that is that it will actually build the precision and scale and varchar length for you. So today, if you wanted to say, take a DMV, say you want to take snapshots of sys.dm exec requests every 5 minutes. So you'd build a table, right? Well, you'd go to sys.columns or sys.all columns, and you would look at the data types, and you would build that create table statement manually, right? And you'd have to say, well, is it n varchar? Now I have to divide the length by 2, but is the length -1? That means I have to change it to max. And what is the precision of this decimal column? And you've got all of these things that you have to piece this script together, and it can be really ugly. This actually spits out the system type name as you would type it in a create table statement. So it actually spits out varchar 32, if that's what it is. It'll spit out n varchar max, if that's what it is. So you don't have to do all of this case and conditional checking against the sys.columns.
Are you going to show us?
Oh, yeah.
That's extra.
Yeah, someone refill my drink and I'll show.
With a check.
All right, so I do have data tools up. I'm going to show that first. So if I connect to SQL Server, oh, come on.
Looks nice.
This is brutal.
That's Mark.
I've got nothing running on this VM. I don't understand. It's only when I'm in the VM. It's not because it's Mac. None of the stuff on the Mac side doesn't respond. It's just Windows.
So does it actually integrate into Visual Studio, or is it its own app?
It'll integrate into whatever edition of Visual Studio you have. If it's all you install, it's its own Visual Studio. But if you have Visual Studio Ultimate, it's just if you choose to do a SQL Server project, that's what you get put into.
It's not a standalone application.
Well, it's Visual Studio. So today, you can have Visual Studio Professional or Visual Studio Ultimate. It's just an addition to Visual Studio. So if you have Visual Studio Ultimate and you install Data Tools, it's part of Visual Studio. So it's one of the projects that you can pick as a SQL Server database project.
I don't have any Visual Studio. I want to just.
You will install Visual Studio. When you install Data Tools, it's Visual Studio.
Yeah.
It's just an addition of Visual Studio.
So you have to pay for extra for it.
Sorry?
You have to pay extra. The license.
Yeah. This won't be free. Just like Database Edition isn't free today. I am stuck. I don't know why I'm trying to. Oh, okay, I see. All right, so I go into a server, I go into databases. Let's just pick any database. I want to say add new table. Okay, I want to say add new table. I apologize for the slowness. This is usually a little snappier than this. All right, so very reveal codesy. If I add a column called bar, make it an ncar 10, not allow nulls. You see how the script down below all changed in real time. If I go down here and say, you know what, I want that to be null, then the checkbox becomes checked up above. If I say unique, well, I don't know if that says, should add a constraint up here, yeah, so it'll add a unique constraint right there. So it's very interactive. You can edit things on whichever side you're comfortable on, and it updates the other for you. So I don't know if it was worth all that weight to show that, but that was the coolest thing I found about it. So I'm obviously not that interested in the tool. I think it can do a lot of cool things. Schema compare, data compare, those things are pretty powerful. I don't know if it's as good as Redgate's tools, but I think they're trying. So I don't know why all these are open. All right, so metadata discovery. So a couple of problems with FMT only. So if I say set FMT only on, and then I have a conditional if and else, it doesn't know how, it doesn't understand the if and else. It can't parse that correctly. So when I actually run this, I get two results, which doesn't make a lot of sense. If I can only get one result back, why should I see both? That'll never happen. It's either going to be one result or the other. There's another case where, again, it doesn't parse the conditional for set FMT only off. So set FMT only on, I set at line 20, and then I say if 1 equals 2, set FMT only off. And when I do select star from sysindexes, I expect it to show me just the format and not return any data. However, that's not what happens. I get the data because it didn't see that the set FMT only off statement was in a conditional. So there's some other issues with that, but I won't get into them. So here we have a pretty simple table called X. It's got some columns of various complexities. So we've got a decimal 12.2, an nvarchar, a sysname, which is actually an alias type for nvarchar
124.
No, it's either 128 or 250.
120, 127.
128. 128. We've got a bit, we've got a date time 2 with a precision of 4 decimal places. So we create this table, and today, if I wanted to recreate this create statement by using the metadata, the catalog views, this is essentially what I would have to do. It's a pretty ugly query. We don't have to go through it all, but I think you can understand that pulling all of this data from the views is pretty complex, and I believe I don't even get everything that I need there. So we've got the names, we've got the sysname, right? So even after I do this, I still have to do some things here. So to get that to be max, I've got to do a case in the select somewhere that says case when max length is -1, put a max. I talked about this already, boring you. Now here's a DMV that lets me just pull out name, user type name, system type name, and is nullable from this DMV. I pass in a query that says select star from dbo.x, and I hit run. And now we've got a much tidier set of data. I wish I could zoom in on that a little bit. So we've got our column names, we've got the user type name. So if you wanted to use the sysname alias, you could do a coalesce here, because all the user type names where an actual system type name is used is null. So you could do coalesce user type name, comma, system type name. And then the system type name actually has the nice designation. So I've got my precision, I've got my scale, I've got my max length. nvarchar max actually shows nvarchar max instead of -1. And then I've got my nullable as well.
Can you pass a name and store procedure still the statement?
Yes, so there is there's a stored procedure that'll take an object name. I don't have a sample of that, but yeah, there's one that says it's the same name, but it's SP describe first result set for object, and you just pass in an object ID.
A functional.
I haven't tried it for functions, but I suspect, yeah.
Table.
A table value function, yeah. So this is another one. This is a very simple way to build. Now, it took me a few minutes to type this, obviously. This wasn't as simple as I make it sound, but this will build a way for me to store snapshots of sys.dmexec sessions. So I've got my, and if I go to results to text, it probably looks a little bit better. I don't want to do this by hand, but it looks pretty good if I do it this way with just a few lines of code. So I've got all of my column names here with all the right data types, whether they're null or not, and then a closing create table statement. So I've just built a great big massive complex create table statement by writing 4 lines of code. So it doesn't work with temp tables. So I've got one here. This is a batch that has a table variable, and it works no problem. Switch back to results to grid. So I've got my column name is I've got my int data type. It can tell me about those things. If I try with a temp table, however, I get an error. Metadata cannot be determined because the statement uses a temp table.
If the statement has a return value, it's a first result set.
Yes. Good.
Some people write store procedures something having a return -5 whatever. Is that considered it's gonna give you like
I'm sorry, I missed something in between 5.
a return?
Return?
Yeah. So in store
This doesn't. This is about result sets. It has nothing to do with output parameters or return
Okay.
values. And if people are returning data using the return statement, you should slap them.
Next year.
It can also sniff
Oh, yeah.
undeclared parameters. So if you have a SQL statement and you're trying to figure out what those, if you see something in Profiler, for example, that says select star from wherever where column name equals variable, and you don't know what that variable type is, you can pass it into this store procedure, and it will tell you based on the columns. So it goes and reverse engineers the columns from that table. So sys.objects has columns, object ID and name, and it'll tell you exactly what those are. So, or it guesses. It makes a best guess based on the input and the table it looks underneath. So name is not an nvarchar 4000 in sysobjects, but it's making a guess. So it can give you a good idea about what that statement might look like if you actually populated the parameters. So at least you can tell between numeric and strings and that kind of thing. And so if you have things where you can't derive something, so you just have a variable that's referenced and there's no context, it doesn't come from anywhere, it actually comes back with an error. So it says that it can't deduce the parameter type. 2 possibilities are SQL variant and XML. Now I know that neither of those data types are the ones I intended there, but again, it has to have some information to base its guess on. All right. So on the flip side, they also added an extension to execute called with result sets. So this basically lets you define a contract for the shape of a result set. So if you have a set of columns that are coming back, let's take SP Hutu. How many people like SP Hutu? Everybody uses it, right? Notice there are 2 SPID columns. So if you want to select the results of that into a table, no go. Applications might have problems dealing with it because there are multiple column names. SPID is also a car data type. I don't know if everybody realized that, but it comes back as a car. There's also one column in that result set called BLK by, which is block by. I don't know why they didn't spell it out because every other column is spelled out except for that one. And so if you want to make that result set look a little prettier, you can attach this with result sets clause to the exec, and you can actually say these data types are, this is what this data type should be, this is what this column should be named. So you could call SPID, the second SPID column, redundant SPID. You could change BLK by to block by, that kind of thing. Just make it a little more self-documenting, especially for apps that are consuming that, the API that's consuming that. Why deal with these cryptic names and redundant columns? The things that you can't do, you can't convert to a type that's not compatible. So if you have a string column, you can't convert it to an int because it's going to break if you actually have strings stored. You also can't add columns or remove columns from the result set, but you could change the shape of the columns that are coming back.
So you can actually change, for example, the SPID to like an integer column?
Yes. So, but if you, in this case, it'll work because you know that a SPID
Right,
is always
yeah.
convertible to an int. If you have a column that contains strings, it'll fail at runtime. So just a couple of examples. Here's SP-Who2. So SPID I changed to an int. Blocked by I changed to blocker. And the second SPID column I changed to redundant SPID. So when I run that, I've got one column called SPID. Block by is now called blocker. And the second SPID column is called redundant SPID instead of SPID.
Do you have to do all the columns, or is it just in that line?
Yeah, you can't skip columns. You have to dictate all of them. Yep. So, but you can build that with the metadata views from the last slide. Right? Just wonder if there's anything. Oh yeah. Okay. So if I have if I want to pull back a lot of text, so Management Studio is pretty limited in what it shows you in the result pane, right? If you have a grid, you can have a maximum of 8,100 characters. I forget which one. One of them has more. If you have a grid, you can have so many characters. If you have results to text, you have so many characters. With results to text, your columns are mixed in there. So if you want to copy a bunch of one column that has a lot of text, you get all the other stuff from the other columns. If you have a grid, it gets rid of all the carriage returns. So when you copy and paste, it's one long string. There's not really a good solution to that in Management Studio unless you extract to a file. So here's an example. I have this store procedure that has a bunch of text in it. If I want to copy and paste and take a look at that result, this only works as good as this because I have word wrap turned on. If I have word wrap turned off, it would be all the way across the screen.
It's a text.
Well, results to text. So in this case, it works because the store procedure isn't that long, but if your store procedure is longer than 8K,
Yeah.
it's not going to work because it truncates, right? So I can change the second parameter of this to give me the object definition as XML,
It's gonna make sense.
right? So now it's clickable, so that's not that usable until I click. Now I've got the actual store procedure up here, and it'll give me all the text. If it's 64K worth of text, it's all going to come up then.
I actually use it right now in SQL Server 2008. The same thing, of course, the result set. I just take the test and I can
Convert XML.
Yeah, so it's much cleaner. So.
Yeah, but if you're calling a store procedure, you can't do that. You'd have to change the store procedure.
What do you mean?
If you're calling SP-Who2 and you want to click on one of the results, you can't just say exec SP-Who2 but convert column number 3 to XML,
no.
right? You have to go in and change the procedure.
No, but I same for looking into the active text or the store procedure. Or
Right. This lets you do that without changing the store procedure. Because that, if you convert it to XML in the store procedure and other apps are consuming that, you're going to blow them up.
I usually I have actually a hotkey on my shortcut on my Management Studio where I call my store procedure for getting the option definition of whatever option I select on store procedure.
Oh, I see.
To get just the instead of going right click on find the store procedure,
Sure.
I just press Control F4 and it gives me that result as a text.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.